All right, this is Untold Civil War, and we are at Camp Girardi. Thank you so much for having me here and sharing what I think must be one of the best private libraries that I've ever seen. So thank you again. Can you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here?
Hi, this is you're going to see my research library and collection of Civil War related items that I've been collecting and using for my writing and research for most of my life. I can't remember a time ever when I wasn't interested in the Civil War, and I just got worse as I got older. Here in this humble abode, I have my little wall gallery. On the wall here, one of my images of Chicago. The sign Liberty and Union is based on a historical sign. It's on antique wood painted by a friend of mine, Liberty and Union. Here we have a picture of Civil War veterans in Chicago in the 1890s in the Grand Army of the Republic Memorial Hall, which the veterans built. The cornerstone was laid in 1893. And in this room you can see over 100 Civil War veterans and some of their probably grandchildren with them posed in the main gallery under the rotunda of the GAR Hall in Chicago. Off to the right here are several period photographs of the magnificent equestrian monument of General John Alexander Logan that stands at 9th Street and Michigan Avenue in downtown Chicago in Grant Park, named for U.S. Grant. John A. Logan was a phenomenal Illinois politician before the Civil War, became a colonel of the 31st Illinois, made his way up to the rank of Major General and took over temporarily command of the Army of the Tennessee after James McPherson was killed in July of 1864 at the Battle of Atlanta. But because he was not a West Pointer, he was not given permanent command of the Army. Sherman was biased. So here are two views from the era. This one here is probably right before the dedication of the monument. There's an engraving, a signature, and a carte de visite of Logan.
One thing I'll say is, if people want to learn more about the monument, we do have a video coming out of our tour, Civil War tour of Chicago, and we were at that location. So I'll put a link in the description about that video for sure.
So this area highlights Chicago. I have a couple of original Keith Rocco, the famed, world famous historical artist. Early on, he did a lot of Civil War, and I worked many times with him. Here's an original pencil sketch of a soldier, and here is another one showing Stonewall Jackson looking over Tom's Brook in the Shenandoah Valley, over the creek there with a staff officer behind him. It's a magnificent piece of artwork. Down here is an engraving of the dedication of the U.S. Grant Monument, which stands in Lincoln Park, Chicago. If you drive down Lakeshore Drive, you can see this on your right-hand side if you're going south. A magnificent monument. More than 200,000 people turned out for the dedication of this monument. I don't know if you can zoom in and see the crowd of the carriages and all the other groups of people that are there. Here's a Harper's image of Camp Douglas as it appeared during the Civil War, and below that is another drawing of Confederate prisoners of war in Chicago's Camp Douglas. Going here, this is a photograph of a soldier from Illinois but who joined a Missouri regiment, August Reimers, and this is a wartime photo of him in his gear, and this original oil painting is a derivative of this photograph. We have some other artwork, but this is one of the showpieces of my collection, this magnificent shop sign. This is all made of wood. It's raised off the surface. You can see it's painted. Petridge, makers of cannon barrels and balls, suppliers of powder and shot, established in 1777. This is the original shop sign. I wish I could tell its origin, but I have not been able to find in my research thus far. I've not been able to tie it to a location. Other basic artwork as we go along. This sign kind of defines the rest of what might lie around the corner without giving away the store. This is my archive of original Civil War letters, documents, diaries, manuals, and other things that lead to the research. I believe in primary sources, tying primary sources together, drawing from them to get the soldier's point of view, what's important to them. So, sitting in a chair writing a book, you can think you know what the soldiers thought about and try to project that, but when you read their letters and they care more about the price of the cow their wife is going to sell than about who got promoted, sometimes it gives you a little different insight into the way things are going. As we come around the corner into what I call the Camp Girardi Library, a friend of mine christened it that. We come into the main chamber. This is my library, my research library. I started building this when I was still in high school, the years before. For those of you who may not have reached the age of 30, there was once a time when there was no internet. And there was a time when you could not just Google something, you actually had to have material at hand that you could page through. And that's what I did through high school and in my college years to start my research. This section of the library here is mainly reference material. I have books on Civil War art, Civil War photography. You know something about that, Paul?
A little bit.
And so different books on photography, historical and modern type things that document the Portraits of Conflict series for Confederate is phenomenal as a resource. We have some more general references, the great Alan Nevin's Ordeal of the Union, Bruce Catton's Army of the Potomac trilogy. Unfortunately, Cap Beatty left us before he finished his history of the Army of the Potomac. He only got 3 volumes done. But here's Van Horn's History of the Army of the Cumberland. So these are Union Army histories. Battles and Leaders of the Civil War and other ancillary things that talk about United States regular troops. And we'll just pull one randomly here. Civil War Field Artillery by Earl Hess, who writes a book about every other week, and they're all good. One of the more recent acquisitions of Soldiers from Experience. This is a history of the 15th Army Corps. I'm not quite finished with it, but it's an excellent book to show you the evolution of the armies and how the soldiers grew into their jobs in the volunteer armies, especially in the Western Theater, which is what I specialize in. Again, more general sources down here are my atlases, map books, and army manuals, both reprinted, but also original manuals, drill manuals, bayonet tactics, cavalry tactics, etc. And here, of course, is the cornerstone of any Civil War library, the official records of the Union and Confederate armies in the War of the Rebellion. The naval official records, and then another 100 volumes of the supplement to the official records, which includes reports that didn't make it into the original ORs, and then all the regimental itineraries. So if you want to know on a company level for every Union regiment where they were and when they were there, in greater or lesser detail, that's the building blocks. Here's my art cart with a bunch of Civil War prints, most of them from my friend and colleague Keith Rocco. Down below I have other books, Moore's Rebellion Record, the papers of the Joint Committee on the Conduct of the War, the papers of the Military Historical Society of Massachusetts, and of course the Mallas, which I argue was the original Civil War Roundtable, where Civil War officers presented papers on various aspects of the Civil War on every topic imaginable in front of an audience of their peers. So they better get their facts straight or they're going to be refighting the war in the dining room.
No, I'll just say this was not planted when I came here by me, right? This is free advertising right there.
When I found out about the Untold Civil War podcast, I immediately joined up, and you may see several billboards throughout. It's not the only case. You see Civil War American Battlefield Trust caps. I'm one of the founders as a member, not always a major contributor. This is my Lincoln bookshelf, which is still in construction. I need to add to it, but this whole bookcase here is dedicated to Abraham Lincoln. And then we have two bookcases for the Confederate States. If you didn't have an enemy, you didn't have much of a war. So Confederate images and flags, etc., are here because they participated as part of the history, and if you want to study it, you have to study all of it, not just a niche. Lee's lieutenants, histories of the Army of Tennessee, the Army of Northern Virginia, etc., North Carolina regiments. I like these volumes of the Tennessee Civil War questionnaires. After the war, some correspondents interviewed hundreds and hundreds of Confederate soldiers and documented by a question and answer format what their service was. Confederate Veteran Magazine, the Southern Historical Society papers, encyclopedias of the Confederacy, etc., and then various Confederate government or business things, finances, Confederate money, etc., and post-war lost cause. This is the Confederate States of America here. Books of scholarship, books of essays, they're dealing with various campaigns and or individuals, Civil War generalship, leadership, strategy. This is a good resource to cover a lot of topics. Instead of reading a 1,000-page book, you can get a 20-page essay and get a handle on many things. This is probably, oh look, there's a Untold Civil War podcast and a Civil War digital digest. I will advertise your competition a little bit. This is the library museum bookshelf, books on weapons, uniforms, accoutrements, infantrymen's gear, cartridge boxes, canteens, other material goods, headgear, and all the weaponry and artillery. This is a great resource for information. If you want to know something, how it works, what weapon is that you're looking at, you can find it here.
Now, talking about material culture, you don't just have the books. If I just pan over here, this is probably going to be the envy of many a collector that watch this channel. Maybe we can look at some of your collection here and you can point some things out. I'm
a poor man's Civil War collector of artifacts. I prefer artifacts that tell a story. I like to have representative samples of things that the soldiers used or endured during their service. And so I don't want a pristine piece. I want something that was there, something that got used, something that was at the battle potentially. And there's a mix in here. There's very few non-authentic items in here. Most of it is original. Not all of it has a pedigree, but there are a few pieces that really tell a story. I have this divided. There's muskets and swords up on the top shelf. So I have my original musket, a model 1842 Springfield 69 caliber, and behind it a reproduction Enfield, which will be replaced with an original at some point. And a musket barrel from a weapon that was recovered in the Battle of the Crater. So I have representative samples of things that were used. This is my infantry corner, officers and camp kit. So an original office kepi, field glasses, an officer's crimson sash, coffee pot, bucket, coffee cup, boiler, and collapsible tin cups. These are all original relics. Then the infantryman's gear, cartridge boxes, canteens, bayonets, buttons, and personal items, like the famous photograph of the orphans of Gettysburg, and some cabinet card photographs of Illinois soldiers. I specialize in Illinois topics. Battlefield digs, canteens, cups, sword, scabbard from a sword, various shell fragments, some identified from the battlefield from which they were excavated, mostly anonymous, but they tell the tale. They were there. These were on the battlefield. Entertainment, soldiers' cards, their poker chips, domino sets, etc. And down below is the artillery. Whether it's a 30-pound parrot shell or a cross-section of a 12-pound case shot. You can see, I like this because it shows you how it worked. You can see where the fuse goes, you can see the chamber of the fuse, and then the matrix of explosive with the round balls inside. It's easy to talk about it. To me, it looks better when you can actually show how the thing worked. And then here I have partially exploded shells recovered from battlefields.
You even have a very neat collection in regards to Civil War medicine, right?
Yes. So I don't have a full field surgeon's kit. My basic economic unit is how many books can I buy with this money? So several $1,000s for a surgical kit is a little out of my reach, but I do have pieces of some saws, bone saws, tourniquets, probes, and other items, lancets, a fleam, a syringe, and a feeder cup, which is kind of interesting, so that you could feed a convalescent soldier with this cup without spillage. So if you were serving him or if he was serving himself, Aladdin's not going to pop out of here, but some chicken soup might. So various little pieces. This is these are bone splints. So to attach with these spring clasps to hold you and immobilize a limb. And I try to illustrate some of the relics with various miniatures. Well, my little toy soldiers, I would say. I have a naval section highlighting the USS Cairo with a model, but also some relics from the Cairo, and then original some souvenirs that go with it to tell that story against the backdrop of the replica of the period engraving. And the gunboat. The Cairo was the first ship to be sunk with an electronic mine. Down below, railroads. Railroads, one of my specialties. The Civil War was a railroad war, and I have various types of track, but the Union used modern rail for the most part, but the Confederacy and some poor Union railroads used various different types of rail. A lot of it broke down. There's 3 or 4 different varieties of Civil War iron, all original, down here. And then we get to the engineers. These are related areas. The engineers, another one of the areas I specialize in. So I have some of their tools to measure distances when they're building fortifications, compasses and protractors, headgear, the insignia for their hats, whether they were topographical or just a regular corps of engineers before they consolidated. I have a claw block for a pontoon boat, so when they lash the boats together to build a bridge, like at Fredericksburg and other places, that was how they secured the boats together. And then a pontoon anchor. This is my telling the story a little bit through miniatures to show some of the variety of uniforms. We have a famous incident of a Union soldier feeding a canteen to a Confederate. We have the fight for the flag at Gettysburg. And then there are replicas of famous images like the Confederate POWs at Gettysburg with the miniatures above, and at Massaponax Church, Grant and his staff looking over their maps on the pews that they extracted from the church during the 1864 Overland Campaign. Down here are the GAR, the veterans after the war, and some of their memorabilia. the Corps badges, some photographs of souvenirs, items that these veterans used during their campaigns, and then after the war, commemorative medal for the dedication of the Illinois Monument at Vicksburg, arguably one of the most spectacular Civil War monuments on any battlefield, modeled after the Roman Pantheon. And inside that rotunda, around the walls on bronze plaques, are the names of every single Illinois soldier, some 23,000 of them that fought in the Vicksburg campaign. And so these items were important to the veterans, their service was important, and they formed the Grand Army of the Republic after the war so that they could talk to people who understood them.
Now, you're a published author, you do give talks, and I know you do a lot of research, and the magic happens a little bit over here, right?
Yep. So as we delve into the chamber, you see the office. It's a work in progress. I have a two-sided book truck with the books that I'm using for the works in progress, as well as the things stacked on the shelves behind. The bourbon is an intensifier. But this is a great area to sit and think and draw from. Over here I have books on general information research, statistical books, biographical things, finding aids, bibliographies, etc. So a little bit of something for everyone. Here's the rest of the chamber. I have a naval section, a medical section, POWs, many books on POWs, Army doctors and surgeons, and then this bookcase here, all Civil War railroad titles, various railroad histories, but also histories of the railroads that were important for transporting troops and sending supplies over the rails during the various campaigns. Try to get as much of that as I can and supplement it with original documents, soldiers' letters detailing issues with the railroads, accidents, or building the bridges, or many other railroad-related topics.
Now, I know that when I spoke to you earlier, you told me that you try to have every topic, at least theater or subject matter, you try to have a section for it in your library.
Well, the way I looked at it originally was, if I could have some information on every topic and finding aids, I could start the lion's share of my research at home for the basic information. And then with that as the building block, without having to travel all over the globe to get that information, I can have some of it here, and I try to limit myself to the best sources available, scholarly topics. But if a book is lame in its content or less than useful, it finds its way elsewhere. And I try to supplement it with something better and more informative. The idea being that I could start research on any given topic right here.
Can we go through maybe real quick through the bookshelf over here, and you can let us know what sort of topics you have covered on these shelves back here?
Okay, well, my library is my own system of organization. I do it in a way that makes sense to me. So most of it, especially out here, is topical, like medical. And so I have the practicums, so surgeons' manuals and things of that nature, to the general history of how the medicine evolved, to the individual letters or diaries of surgeons and nurses on both sides, Union and Confederate. This is not just one subject library. And then we come to the military campaigns. Well, if you want to study the Civil War, you kind of have to know why we had it. And so these are my campaign histories and battle histories, beginning with the Alamo and the struggle for new territories and the controversy over whether those territories would become slave or free states. So much of this deals with that, but then we actually do have a war. And so starting with Fort Sumter and making our way, I have all the military campaigns, both Eastern and Western Theater. I don't have them segregated. I have them next to each other. So Gettysburg, Vicksburg, and Gettysburg. Why? Because I never want to forget what's happening concurrently with whatever topic I'm studying. And so you have to remember that the war isn't one-dimensional. There's multiple theaters and things are going on. So trying to orchestrate a command or a strategy is a complicated thing, not just to zoom in, focus, and forget about the rest of the world. It all matters. And so we go through the campaigns, and we come into the main chamber, what I call the canyons. Here in the first canyon, the military campaigns continue all the way through the surrenders and then the immediacy afterwards. So the end of the war, before really the beginning of Reconstruction. So many books have come out recently that really deal in a very good way with these topics, like After Appomattox or West from Appomattox, that are dealing with the surrenders and then the reintegration of especially the Confederates back home and the Union management of those parolees, and how do you make it happen without reigniting the war. Then I have my section of Confederate biographies in alphabetical order from every theater, their letters, their diaries if they publish them, or biographies, and then guerrilla warfare and raiders and the war in the Trans-Mississippi. These are my Union biographies. Every major leader that left a record and multiple biographies. I have many books on U.S. Grant, some better than others. So going through all the major commanders, so anybody that you would expect to hear from, like Winfield Scott Hancock or James Harrison Wilson or Winfield Scott, Grenville Dodge is here, Sherman, Sheridan, etc. I have something on all of them, and if I don't, it's because it's unavailable. I try to tell the whole story. Here I have books on General Warren, whom I'm currently writing a book on, and then I go into some of the battlefields, preservation efforts, things of that, and then the monuments, the memory of the war, and some of the controversies over the monuments, but also the history of the monuments and why they were there and what they meant to the people who put them there, not to the people who choose to interpret or misinterpret them today at their whim. It's a controversial topic. I don't choose to ignore it. I choose to try to understand it and educate myself on the controversy. This is my engineer railroad wall. Pieces of rail, a Civil War blockhouse that was built to defend the railroads. Everybody knows the engineer monument at Gettysburg. An engraving of the engineers crossing the river. And then we come into my Union regimental histories, organized in alphabetical order by state, numerical order by regiment, sometimes prefaced with generic titles like, where's my Wisconsin book here, the Military History of Wisconsin, and then the Wisconsin regiments follow. That encompasses this. Here we break from the alphabetical order for Illinois. I admit to a bias. I want to have every source on Illinois I possibly can. That's my specialty. So these two full bookcases are Illinois titles from original rare books to most recently released titles. This is the building blocks of my research for Illinois. We come back to the end. We have United States colored troops, regimentals, going into the Grand Army, the Republic, the Memory of the War, and other titles. But that's not all. Back here we have the Confederate regimental histories in alphabetical order, telling all of their stories, as many as I can fit in here. And then at this shelf here tells the Civil War in different cities, regions, or areas. So, for example, Maryland civilians in the Antietam campaign, or Baltimore during the Civil War, or St. Louis in the Civil War, or Lansing, Michigan. So if you're studying a campaign where a battle occurred, that's not the whole story. Those battles had impact on the area and they fit into a bigger local picture. And so these books supplement that information so that you never forget the war isn't just this regiment to that regiment on the flanks and the battle is fought and over. Here we have common soldier stories, so what the war was about for the soldiers, how they felt about it. Then there's a documentary history of the Civil War, legal issues, constitutional issues with the war, legal cases, court martials, desertions, disloyalty, etc. Coming into spies. And then international politics, things like these, the papers, the Russell papers, Lyons Stewart papers, the British government policy papers, their letters to each other, to understand their rationale and their viewpoint, what their interests were in the outcome of the war. Civil War soldiers were people. They had religious beliefs. They had people who didn't fight and were at the home. So I have books on the home front, Civil War religion, women and children, and the impact of the war on them. And then, of course, the newspapers, because, you know, they always get it right. So various accounts from Civil War reporters in the field, either their memoirs or letters or books of the news stories. Observers like George Templeton Strong out of New York, fighting editors, and books on slavery and the impact of slavery and emancipation. And then I have the politicians before the war and their struggles. So biographies of some of the major players, a little bit of everything. There's really not many gaps in topical matter. Maybe I'm missing a few thousand books I need, but right now I'll do with what I have.
How many books do you think you have?
Counting, because some people could argue that the books on the history of the Texas annexation and the Mexican War are not really Civil War, although I think history is a streamline. You have to understand how we got here. There's a war for a reason, and it didn't just start on April 12th of 1861. I would say in the neighborhood of 8,000. That's a guess. But when I moved in here, I had a minimum of 400 boxes of books with about 20 books per box. So the arithmetic tells me that that's 8,000. So it's probably higher than that, but I haven't sat here and counted them. I'd rather read them than count them.
Well, thank you so much for giving us a tour of this awesome Civil War library. I can't wait to take this video and show it to my girlfriend so she knows what I want my future basement to look like. But I guess now there's some other specific items that we wanted to talk about, and that's going to be in the next video. So thank you all for watching this video, and we've got more content on the way. Thank you again for showing us the library. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. I'm honored.